What's up, guys? How's everybody doing today? Good? Good as always? I will take that as a good. We are back for another session today for the developmental camp. Today we're actually going to be covering role fundamentals. So I know that we've kind of gone through things as far as the basics of the game, picking a champion, things of that nature. Today we're going to kind of go into what each of the positions are kind of responsible for, as well as the overlapping concepts for every position that you should kind of know. It is a little bit more text heavy and talking heavy today, but I'm going to try and keep it interesting and as engaging as possible. So we're going to talk through all these concepts, and then if you guys are in the chat, please let me know if you want to get into a game. I'd be happy to go over some of these role fundamentals or specific champion fundamentals to walk you guys through that kind of stuff in a game. So we'll do that after we go through everything. But yeah, just let me know what your summoner name is. I'll get you added on my end, and then we can actually jump into a game from that standpoint. But again, as always, without further ado, we will jump right into the presentation. So just to recap from session 2 a little bit. So we covered picking champion, right? So remember, consider options if you're playing other games. Maybe try and find some champions with some similarities in League of Legends that are going to be easily translatable. They fit really well with you. It works really well. And then again, familiarize yourself with those actual champion abilities. The more you repeat, the more you play through them, the easier it's going to get. You don't have to really even think about it. It just becomes second nature. Going back to kiting, if you'll remember, you're basically trying to maximize your damage output while you're consistently moving. So you're just trying, instead of standing still and just letting the enemy attack you, you're actually trying to still maintain that same level of distance and still do something simultaneously. So in addition to that, that kind of goes hand in hand with orb blocking while you're actually managing your damage output while you're consistently making those movements in between. If you guys did have the opportunity to go and practice some of that stuff, I would love to hear about how it went, where you maybe had some difficulties. Try to talk about some of those things. And again, if we're able to get into a game at the end of the session, can actually go over some of those difficulties that maybe you had and coach you through those. And then last but surely not least, animation canceling. So being able to optimize the amount of damage that you're able to do in those small time constraints. So like we talked about, Riven, super heavy on animation canceling to be able to play her at some of the highest levels. But in some combinations, it actually, or in some situations rather, it actually extends the animation of an ability or extends the range of an ability whenever you're combining it with things like Flash. You can utilize it to catch your opponents off guard too. So again, just a quick recap from last session. But today, as we go over the fundamentals, so every role that we're going to talk about, or every role that you played, at top, jungle, middle, AD carry, support, whatever it may be, each of them have their kind of own nuanced fundamentals, but at the same time, there's a lot of overlapping fundamentals that you should be familiar with no matter what position you actually play. So we're going to go over both, and then we're going to go over the ones that, kind of each role should, after you've got the basic overlapping ones, each role can kind of prioritize individually to kind of work through that checklist, if you will. And I say that, working through that checklist, and that as you go through these, this is, like I said, a lot of information. There's a lot of different fundamentals in League of Legends that are going to kind of help you improve as you go throughout the game. Don't feel like you have to tackle all of these all at once. Ultimately, you're going to feel like you're drinking from a fire hydrant, right? Or a fire hose, even. It's so much information to try and do simultaneously that if you try to do every single one at once, you're likely going to falter on all of them. So do actually go and create yourself a checklist. We'll kind of go over that as what you can work on later. But that's going to help you kind of tackle one or two at a time, and it's going to help you learn the game in a much more fun manner instead of feeling overwhelmed by trying to do everything all at once. So, overlapping fundamentals. Accuracy is the first one. So, like we talked about in one of our sessions, figuring out what's actually comfortable for you in terms of your mouse sensitivity is going to be a big issue or a big fundamental that you should try and tackle off the bat. If you're having difficulty landing your skill shots and your abilities, well, it doesn't matter what role you play, it doesn't matter what champion you play, that's going to be a consistent difficulty the whole way through. So it may be a matter of you just need more time with that specific sensitivity to develop the muscle memory around the mouse sensitivity. But at the same time, it could just be another issue where maybe it's too high or way too low for what you're just innately used to moving the mouse speed at. So definitely take that into consideration. Make sure that you have that dialed in and that you're able to regularly land your skill shots. The practice tool is, of course, great for being able to just test that out and try and flick skill shots around, see if you're able to consistently land them on a regular basis. And then map awareness, like we talked about again in some of our previous sessions, the concept of being able to look at the mini map pretty regularly and understand what's going on around the entire map, where other players are for your team, for your opponents, so on and so forth, is going to be a really big issue no matter what you play. So if you're a carry, if you're the jungler ganking, if you're the support player, whatever it may be, you're going to want to understand the current state of the map, making sure that, if you do have vision, if you don't have vision on the map, and where you need to potentially get vision if their mid laner just went disappearing or just went MIA and they could be potentially coming to gank you in bot lane, you need to know that information if they're doing dragon, so on and so forth. And so the map awareness concept is definitely something that regardless of what role you play, you want to be able to get better at. Let's say that, if you're looking at it every 5 to 6, 7 seconds right now, you definitely want to work to increase that. So it can be a little bit difficult because maybe you're an AD carry and your map awareness is really bad and it's causing you to miss CS and then you're getting behind in gold. Well, tackle the map awareness piece first or tackle the CS piece first like we talked about earlier, but don't try to tackle them at the same time. Otherwise that's going to obviously cause a lot of difficulties for you. So realistically you should be looking at the minimap every couple of seconds. So if you feel like you're not, then try and just work towards increasing that. And then general awareness and tracking. And whenever I say that, this is kind of a multifold concept. So it's not just general awareness and general tracking of one thing. And that's why I separated it out from kind of the map awareness. It's being aware of your cooldowns, your team's cooldowns, the opponent, if they just used a summoner spell or if they just used their ultimate ability, or maybe you just want to make sure that we'll go into trading here in a little bit. If you're trying to trade damage back and forth, tracking that, hey, they just used their Q, and I know that they can't obviously do it again because they just used it, so this is a good time for me to try and step forward to be able to CS, or this is a good time for me to try and step forward to be able to trade, and they can't trade back because their ability is on cooldown. So situations like that, just being generally aware of that and tracking that kind of information is going to be a big necessity, again, no matter what role that you're actually playing. And then I know that we've covered and gone in depth with communication in one of the more competitive sessions, but communication's a big thing. So I'm going to kind of go through the ping system a little bit later. So, I mean, realistically, it's not always feasible to type everything out. Maybe you're not actually in a team environment. Maybe you're in a solo queue game. So you're not in Discord with somebody or TeamSpeak or any other communication program. So you can't talk to them. But you're needing to actually, just ping things very quickly or communicate in some capacity. Just avoiding communication entirely is really going to be a detriment to the team. So do try to communicate, again, no matter what role you're actually playing. And then the basic champion itemization. As we've kind of gone through on the menu with the purchasing of various items, Riot's done a great job at laying out basic champion itemization and different build paths that you can go for more offensive or more aggressive build paths versus more defensive ones, situational items. You can even go and customize your own build outs. But trying to understand what basic build paths are for the champions that you're playing is a very basic fundamental. Trying to get the grasp on what the items do and how they work with your champion, things of that nature. Going on to a couple of other fundamentals. Vision. So this goes hand in hand with the concept of map awareness, right? But at the same time, actually making sure that you're contributing to the vision, either from the standpoint of going and killing enemy wards or actually buying wards yourself. Pretty good rule of thumb that I always try to hold players accountable for is always try to have a control ward in your inventory, no matter what position you're playing, try to always have a control ward. And so when I say that, I don't want everybody to get the misconception that, oh, I'm going to go buy a control ward and I'm going to hold it the whole game and then I did what he said. That's not really effective. That's not really contributing. So don't feel like that's necessarily helpful. But actually going and trying to use a control ward in a valuable way, and then let's say you use that, or let's say it gets killed, just make sure that every time you're backing, if you do have the excess gold, you're able to actually go and purchase another one to be able to constantly have some sort of vision that you're contributing to, because that does really help your team out. Going back to that mini-map awareness, helps you have those vision lines, different sets of vision controls, so that you can take neutral objectives like we talked about as well. So always make sure to do that. And there are going to be some nuanced situations where, let's say you have 6 items and you can't afford to buy an extra, vision item, and it's really late game. Of course, there's exceptions to the rule, as there are with most rules in League of Legends, but especially in the early to mid game, always make sure that you are able to try and get that vision to help your team out. And then maintaining efficient CS. This is always a big one. Everybody always likes to measure how well they're doing or how well they're performing by if they're able to actually maintain efficient CS. So if you go and you watch a pro match, typically what people like to say is that you go by a metric of having 10 CS per minute if you're something like a top laner, mid laner, or an AD carry. Obviously, that's different with the support because you're not really CSing. And then with the jungler, that actually changes a bit to where it's actually about 5 CS per minute. Having said that, again, there's always going to be different scenarios and different situations that occur that maybe they prevent you from getting optimal CS, and so you're ending up with 8 or 9 per minute. Maybe you're really far behind in the early game and you're trying to get caught up in the mid to late game and catching multiple waves from different lanes or taking CS from the jungle, whatever it may be, to try to optimize that. It's always going to be a different scenario. Or maybe you have 500 CS at the 35-minute mark or something, and you've been able to really get it way more than 10 CS per minute. But regardless of where you're at currently, do take a look at like your last 10 games, for example, and go and look at what has my average CS been in relation to the main role that I play. So if you have some off-role game, don't worry about that. But go look at your main role game. So if you're an AD carry, go look at the last 10 games that you've gotten to play as an AD carry, and look at what your average creep score has been. And start from there and just try to increase it by 0.5 or maybe 1 per minute per game, and see if you're able to do that. And then look at what's realistically preventing you from going and further increasing your CS, right? So what caused it overall? Were you having too much pressure from the enemy jungler? Did you not get enough pressure from your jungler to help you out? Were you too focused on trying to actually fight with the enemy laner, and so you were just focused on dealing damage to them, and it was causing you to miss CS? Were you unfamiliar with the champion and you just were a little bit uncomfortable and you didn't understand the damage that you were going to deal whenever you were trying to last hit, so it threw you off just a little bit? There's multiple scenarios that can happen, but just assess those and look at each game as to maybe what prevented you from getting to a 7, 8, or 9 or 10 per minute, and then just slowly try to increase that. If it's just you're just missing them because you're uncomfortable with the champion, again, it's not the most fun thing in the world, but do what we talked about in one of the earlier sessions and go further familiarize yourself with the amount of damage that they do in the early and in the mid game, so before you have those items, you can still consistently land your CS. And then trading. So trading comes into play whenever you're trying to trade damage back and forth with your opponent. So we're going to talk about kind of trading windows. Hope that you guys have some good questions of scenarios that you've encountered or when you can implement trading. Would love to talk about that with you guys. But trading is basically looking at, if this person on the opponent team moves up to try to get this CS, can I trade damage back with them and come out ahead? Are they going to end up taking more damage? Because ultimately what happens is that if you're consistently able to do that, understanding the kind of damage that they're able to trade onto you and that you're able to trade onto them, if you can come out ahead, or if you have more sustain with, let's say you have a Janna or a Sona or a Nami, something like that that's providing you healing, and they don't, well then you can trade that damage onto them, and you're chipping them out of lane slowly but surely, and you're able to do things like, this goes into wave management, but force waves into their towers where then they're losing CS, and you can continue to build a CS lead for yourself. So that's kind of how trading plays a role in the fundamentals, but it does take a lot of work, and again, it's not the primary one that you need to immediately start off with, but if you've kind of mastered a lot of the other things that we have gone through so far, it's definitely one that you should be looking into if you feel confident. And then role-based positioning and spacing. So we talked about team fights in one of the other sessions, how you should be positioning according to the role that you're playing with the team. But just understanding that, if you're an AD carry again, or if you're a very squishy support like Sona, understanding the kind of positioning relative to the opponent that you're playing against, and what their trade windows look like, what their damage windows look like, so that you're not caught out of position. Let's see. So you can think of it in terms of, if you have a zone of control, and you have your attack range zone. So something like Tristana, where her attack range is going to increase as the game goes on. You just have to be careful and aware of that, so that you're not walking into those different zones of control as you're trying to trade the damage back and forth. You're not overstepping your bounds in your positioning, and that's going to ultimately detrimentally impact your team. So if we go into the top lane specifically, looking at that, the first thing that I want to talk about is teleport utilization. And this isn't going to be a 100% of the time thing, because realistically you can take a variety of different summoners as a top laner. You can take Ignite, Exhaust, Barrier, Ghost, whatever it may be. But for the times where you are utilizing teleport, trying to understand that teleport utilization, it's not strictly just for you to get back to lane so that you can catch waves. There are scenarios where obviously that is the best use of it, but at the same time, trying to understand that how you can implement and incorporate that into team play so that your team can ultimately come out ahead. If there's a dragon play, and let's say you're playing against a top laner that has Ignite, so they don't have teleport, or maybe they've already used their teleport and you have the teleport advantage, well, you can try and incorporate that into using it so that you have a numbers advantage if your team wants to contest Dragon and the opponent tries to fight back. The same thing if you're trying to help your bot lane. Let's say that the enemy bot lane is pushed to your turret, and they're trying to put a lot of pressure onto your bot lane. Well, if you have a ward behind them in the lane, very easy to utilize teleport to be able to get behind the enemy and for your team to collapse on them, and being able to utilize that effectively. And then trading, like we talked about earlier. So because of the way that top lane is played, it's kind of on an island, so to speak. And so it's very distant from, especially with how dragons work right now, it's distant from, kind of primary objectives. And so with how junglers try to typically play around the dragon, maybe top lane doesn't get as much pressure or isn't as top lane oriented. And so knowing that you're kind of off on your own, how much damage you're able to trade and what those damage windows look like, as well as going back to the sustain. If you're playing at something like a Gangplank where he's able to utilize his W and he's able to heal himself, he's going to have a little bit more sustain than you. And so trying to trade back and forth with him is going to make it a little bit more difficult. If you are the Gangplank, then you are going to be able to sustain a little bit more damage. But understanding how trades like that are going to affect your lane positioning, as well as the overall wave management is a really big concept for top, because you kind of have to rely on yourself and your own ability to be able to secure your CS, to be able to kind of have a successful laning phase so that you can help your team later on past that. Of course, you can always call for jungle support and jungle help to be able to get through that. If you're having difficulty, or if maybe there's a freeze in your wave, to be able to try and break that freeze. But those are some of the priorities in conjunction with the ones that we talked about earlier. So again, not to say that these are the only two ones that you should focus on, but once you've mastered the others, or at least comfortable and familiar with the others, transitioning to how to use your teleport and proper trade windows is a really good segue. So the jungle's a little bit different. Obviously, whenever it comes to getting CS, it's clearing your camps. So there's a lot of proper jungle pathing and things of that nature. But one of the things that I want to talk about is, we talked a little bit about general awareness and tracking. And so whenever I say jungle tracking, it's way different than that. And what I mean by this is that you're actually trying to track the enemy jungler. And so if you do something where you get an early ward, right, and you're able to see where the jungler starts, well, then you can kind of guesstimate as you familiarize yourself with the game, you can kind of understand what the typical jungle path is going to be. Being able to call this out to your teammate is extremely valuable information, so that they can avoid ganks and they can understand that where they're able to position in the lane. For example, let's say that you have a jungler that's on blue side and they start at their red buff, and the likely path is going to be that they're going to go to their Razor Beaks and then they're going to go to their blue. You're able to convey that to the bot lane that, hey, you can play a little bit more aggressive in the early game, because you're probably not going to have any jungle pressure. He started at his red. The best path is that he's going to go to his top. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, it's letting the top laner know and the mid laner know, hey, he started his red. He's probably going to go to his blue. He could go either top or he could go to the mid lane. And so it's trying to warn them of opportunities that are going to be coming up. So again, jungle tracking, it comes in time, and it's not something that you need to learn off the bat, but it is something that once you've moved on from those fundamentals we talked about earlier, it becomes a very important thing as you kind of make your way through the ranks in the game. In addition to that, of course, the responsibility of the jungler is to try and get ganks and try and help the laners get ahead and to win their lanes. And so looking for those different opportunities where the opponents are caught out of position. They're pressuring your laners and they're pushed way up, or maybe they're just not paying attention and they don't have good map awareness, meaning they, as in your opponent, doesn't have good map awareness. They don't have vision. They're not being diligent in trying to have wards up, and so you're easily able to come from out of nowhere and actually get those gank opportunities. Making sure that you're trying to keep track of that goes hand in hand with the actual map awareness itself. And then, like we've talked about, neutral objective tracking. So we talked about how neutral objectives play a role in everything, and the importance of being able to track and monitor them. Well, being that you're tracking all of your camps, your blue buff, your red buff, the enemy's blue buff and the red buff and everything, it's only natural that keeping track of things like Baron and Herald, looking at Scuttle Crab timers and looking at Dragon timers is going to go hand in hand with all of that. So being able to monitor when those are coming up and notify your team, hey, Dragon's coming up in 1 minute. We really need to try and fight for it. We are either break even or maybe we're ahead. Let's try and contest it. Whatever the situation may call for, being able to keep up with and monitor those neutral objectives and the timers accordingly is going to be a really important thing for your team, and being able to convey that information is really important for them. So mid lane, very similar to top lane with the trading concept. Again, trying to trade damage back and forth, understanding where you have the opportunities so that you're not getting pushed out of lane, you're not getting waves pushed to your tower, you're not missing CS, because the CSing concept goes hand in hand with being of importance for the mid laner. Being able to get to that point where you have scaled enough or you have farmed enough to be able to actually output the damage that's necessary. Additionally, I've added vision on here because vision, since you're in a centralized location, there's so many opportunities where junglers can come from and try to gank you. There's so many opportunities where people who are rotating either from the bot lane or rotating and roaming from the top lane are easy to access mid lane from multiple different areas and actually gank you. That's why vision is put in here, is that it becomes an even bigger portion of playing mid lane, either through the brushes on the side or through the pathways that are close to the turrets themselves, over walls, so on and so forth. So making sure that you have those proper ward placements set up, and trying to actually coordinate those with the jungler of, hey, if the jungler is going to put his vision, his control ward in the bot side of the river, I'm going to try and put mine at the top. Now I know that I'm protected from these two angles. Becomes vastly important. And then on to the AD carry, not to beat a dead horse, but being able to trade damage back again as the AD carry is an important thing. But obviously when it comes to CSing, that is of the utmost importance. Typically you see a lot of AD carries end up being the players with the most CS at the end of the game, whenever they're in an optimal scenario. So making sure that you're able to actually properly CS through all phases of the game, not just in the early game, not just in the late game, but through all phases, and being able to optimize that does become something of the utmost importance for an AD carry. Vision, it's not to say that the vision isn't important for the AD carry, because as I said earlier, being able to make sure that you always have a control ward in your inventory, or that you're able to purchase one, is of value to your team. But typically you're going to see other roles in the game be able to prioritize that a little bit more efficiently, versus the AD carry trying to do exactly what that name and that of the role indicates, being able to contribute the money that they're earning from CS towards itemization so that they can properly carry and be able to output the damage. But when you do have excess, it is good to still maintain that level of vision. And then support. So again, as you can imagine, vision being a big piece of the support role, as indicated by the icon of a ward being the icon for a support player. So vision, obviously a big piece of it. You're able to roam around. You're able to, not only that, it synergizes with your items, providing you actual additional wards. So being able to do that and being able to provide that, those vision lines and areas for your team is a consistent priority for support players. Not only that, understanding the trade windows, not just of your own champion, but in conjunction with the AD carry that you're actually playing with, as well as the opponent, trying to understand and coordinate those together, since you are the only duo lane in the game, and how you guys can work together towards, hey, if the AD carry needs to come up and get a CS at this point in time, are you able to trade the damage for them so that they don't have to take the hit? Or can you both trade on an enemy trying to CS and really get extra damage? Beyond that, one of the things that I don't want to make it sound like it's a priority for support players to learn, if it's brand new, or if you're trying to focus on all the other fundamentals. Of course, again, as I've said over and over, don't try to overwhelm yourself. But once you do get comfortable with those things, roaming is a big thing for support players. So you'll see it at all different times. Maybe if you guys just have killed their bot lane and you're able to get a recall off, well, that's a really good opportunity to, you don't want to just go back to lane and just start farming the lane, but if you're able to coordinate roams with maybe the jungler, and you can potentially gank with the jungler at mid, let's say if the mid opponent is pushed up on your mid laner, that's a really good opportunity that's really helpful, and it's something that's extremely unexpected as you kind of, again, grind the ranks, where you can actually help your team. Now, at the same time, roaming can be a double-edged sword, that if you're not communicating the roams effectively, and if you're not actually working with the AD carry to time these, maybe he doesn't have the same expectations that you're going to roam. Maybe he believes that you're going to come down as soon as you recall with him, and you guys are going to be able to actually make a play. Well, communicating with that with your carry to say, hey, I want to look to roam. Are you able to handle the wave? Things of that nature are really going to be helpful for you all. So make sure that you all tried to do that whenever you do look for rooms. Again, it goes kind of hand in hand with the communication piece. It is a valuable skill of being able to do that, and it goes back to the unexpectedness of it, but at the same time, the AD carry needs to be aware of that so they can understand how they're going to play around it. So, with those concepts, I do want to see if there's anybody in the chat. I would love to jump into a game with you guys and kind of go over anything that you guys want to go over as far as fundamentals, CSing, where to place vision, how you can roam, where you can roam, things of that nature, as well as just giving a brief overview of the ping system or anything of that nature, to cover how you guys can still communicate effectively while you're not actually having to type everything out, while you may not be in a voice communication system. So if anybody can put their name in chat, if you guys feel comfortable, if you want to put your summoner name in chat, I can go ahead and get you added on my end, and then we can jump into a game together. While you guys are working on that, I will go ahead and I will jump into the practice tool. And just to go over really quickly what it looks like whenever you're utilizing the ping system, and how you can get that set up and everything. Come on, guys, don't be bashful. I don't bite, nor do I care what your rank is. I just want to help. So, real quick, like I said, I just want to go over the ping system. Nothing too complicated, as you guys would anticipate. But if you go in and you actually go to your hotkeys and go to the communication piece, there's all these different pings that you can bind keys to. So the alert ping, quick alert, on my way, so on and so forth. And the great thing is, so if I use my V, I ping somebody back. If I hold my V down and start to drag my mouse, you get the actual wheel for a lot of different commands. Same thing, if I alt ping, I can just regularly ping, but if I alt and I hold, you can do a variety of things. So you can ping enemy missing, or danger, or on my way, assist me, so on and so forth. So it is really valuable that anybody can communicate, even if you don't want to talk, if you don't want to type, whatever it may be. Still very helpful to be able to say that, hey, my laner's gone missing. Just want to let your team know that, or hey, maybe the mid laner is actually coming down to be able to gank bot lane. Make sure that you ping them back. So make sure that you guys are using that whenever it does come to the in-game communication. So if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to go over those as well. If you're too shy to give me your summoner name or don't want to jump into a game, that's no problem. I'm happy to still do the Q&A piece of the session. We can go through, maybe you guys are struggling with some fundamentals. Again, going back to last session, if you guys have any questions over orb blocking or kiting or animation canceling, or maybe you've had a last rough few games and you had a completely different situation, happy to go over any of the situations that you guys may have, and see how I can help. Well, as always, guys, before we conclude the session, there's a survey to fill out. So make sure that you do fill it out. Of course, you do get a chance to win free RP, and as I continue to say, who doesn't like free stuff? So do make sure that you guys get that filled out so that we can potentially give you some prizes and also improve the camp. I do want to make sure that I also cover, of course, your homework and what you guys can work on. So, as we talked about, there's a ton of fundamentals. There's fundamentals to your personal position. There's fundamentals overall for the game. So what I would do is kind of go through what we talked about and make a checklist for yourself of what all we covered, and look at what you're really good at and what you feel confident in doing, what you don't really have to think about. It's just second nature. And then also look at what fundamentals you really need to work on. And from there, I would try and pick just 1 to 2. You don't really have to overwhelm yourself. Again, if you try to learn too much too quickly, it's just going to end up getting frustrating, and you're less likely to actually excel at it. So just try and prioritize maybe 1 or 2, and then work on those. Go and look at the next week of games, and just try and prioritize those few things. It doesn't matter, and I don't want you to go into the game with the mindset of, oh, I have to win this game. It doesn't matter if you win the game or if you lose the game. It just matters that you improve on those fundamentals. So if the fundamental is, hey, I need to be better about looking at the minimap, try to hold yourself accountable. Hey, I'm going to look at the minimap every few seconds. If it's, hey, I really want to improve my CS, that's really, it's free gold, and I keep losing because I'm not getting strong enough, or I'm missing levels, and I'm just not landing my CS. Try and make sure that you're staying in lane, that you're in range of the minions for the experience, and try to make sure that you're landing those last hits. So practice that, get warmed up, go into the practice tool with the champion that you're going to be, or the champions that you're going to be working to play, and then just work on landing those last hits, and do that as you go through the itemization. Make sure that you're not trying to overtrade too much that's causing you to get forced out of lane, and just look at how you can continuously improve that CS. Still no questions? Still nobody wants to jump into a game? Give you guys another minute or two. So on Thursday we have our next competitive camp, of course. Or sorry, I apologize. On Tuesday we have our next competitive camp, of course. We're going to be discussing the external components of performance. So I know that this is focused specifically on League of Legends and all the in-game aspects, but there's so many external components and external concepts that go along with performance. So maybe you are just starting out in League of Legends, and this is new to you, but your goal is to be able to really climb the ranks and to really excel. That would be a really good session for you guys to attend. So please make sure and try and stay tuned to that, and join us on Tuesday at the same time as today, of course. We'll be discussing all the different components of the external aspects, how they play a role in kind of a cognitive function, and how they can help you guys by taking those into consideration. So I will also be telling some fun stories of things that I've encountered through my career, both as a player as well as working on the business side of things as a coach, and so on and so forth, with various players. So having said that, if nobody has any questions, or if nobody wants to jump into a game, we'll end this session a little early today, guys. But I want to thank all of you for tuning in, and I will look forward to the next session with you guys on Tuesday or next Thursday. Have a good day, guys.